Welcome to BW Business World. Today I have with me the president of Oregon State University, Ms. Jayathi Murthy. Ms. Murthy also happens to be the first woman of color to be leading this university, and she was also the first woman dean of UCLA's engineering school. Ms. Murthy has a doctorate in mechanical engineering and has held several important positions at universities across America. This includes University of Texas, Purdue University, Carnegie Mellon, and Arizona State University. Thank you, Ms. Murthy, for joining me today. Now, my first question to you, of course, is, as a woman in STEM studying mechanical engineering, what made you want to pursue a career as an educator?
As an educator, yeah. So I, obviously got my degrees in mechanical engineering and could have gone in either direction, could have gone to industry and could have gone to academia. And I actually did both. I mean, if you look at my resume, I spent about 10 years of my life in a startup that did really well, a software startup, and then actually decided that my long-term future lay in education. The earliest reason for doing it was just love of teaching. I mean, I just love being in the classroom, being in front of students. And I felt that, that there is no wrong way to be a teacher. If you did a good job, this was an intensely satisfying career. And I still think that, right? The other thing that made me want to go into education early on in my career was really the chance to work at the cutting edge of research. I was excited by the idea that we could be generating new knowledge and that you could be, pushing the boundaries of knowledge in a field. And I just love doing that. So those are the things that motivated me as a young person coming back into academics. But in leadership, the reason I've taken on an academic leadership position is a chance to move the big levers, to not only to build on success as an individual, but to move institutions. And there are lots of things to move in institutions, right? Women in STEM, for example, is still a difficult space and needs work. And it's not just women. We've got people from all kinds of different backgrounds coming into universities and certainly into STEM subjects and into engineering. If you want to realize the full dream of democracy and building on pathways for everybody, both in the US and in India, the first thing you got to do is education, because education is the pathway to a successful and comfortable and happy life. And if you provide that to a person, to a young student, they not only make themselves successful and their family successful, but in fact, their future family successful. And to me, this is really a very exciting idea that if you can make that kind of difference, it's a big, big deal.
Absolutely. There's a lot of power in education, and it's really important to see, diversity among our educators and among our leaders, because I also kind of encourage you to also, sort of see the different paths you can follow as a student, as a young student, especially. You've said a lot of different things here, and I definitely want to touch upon research as well as STEM. But, I know that diversity and inclusion is a major agenda for you and for Oregon State. Yeah. And diversity, we already have that. The inclusion is the challenge, right? So can you tell me a little bit about what steps you've taken to kind of create this inclusivity, especially, now that the more we globalize, the more people feel the need to kind of hold on to their identities and their individualism.
Yeah. So, you're right. I mean, there are still challenges to diversity in particular parts of our educational fields. I mean, not all fields are as diverse as we would like them. And of course, demographics have changed. Certainly in the US, they're changing pretty substantially. And so keeping on top of the diversity piece is also important. But you touch on something really important. It's inclusivity, it's belonging. And there are certainly issues around justice that have come up a lot in recent years in the US and particularly on US campuses. So it's not simply a question of bringing a lot of students in from different backgrounds and then letting them sink or swim. Inclusivity is kind of a cultural and an atmospheric thing in campuses, right? So making sure that students feel comfortable, that the classroom is comfortable for students of different backgrounds, that when, for example, people are doing projects or group work or things like that, everybody is heard. There's a chance for people to assert leadership, women as well as people of different backgrounds. That the campus atmosphere allows students to be successful. Uh, these are the kinds of things that we're working on. So there are many entities all across campus which support cultural initiatives, student support services, mental health services. So there are even issues around affordability. So we support a whole big range of services for students.
So taking the conversation a little bit broader, we do, like you said, you don't see a lot of diversity in STEM particularly, but also in generally in education institutes. What are some misconceptions do you think that education institutes or higher education institutes in general have when it comes to trying to broaden or expand their diversity agenda when they try to create inclusivity? What do you think some things that they maybe find very challenging or they don't even think about?
No, so I don't know that it's educational institutions in particular, but I will tell you this. I mean, I think uh, when we bring in students from many different backgrounds, we have to recognize that not all paths are the same. So I'll tell you that there are students who come from backgrounds where they are the first generation in college. So parents have not gone to college, for example. Whereas there are students who come from backgrounds where both parents have, PhDs and they understand the college path really well. These are students with very different resources. So if you are first generation college, you may not even know how to apply for college. You may not know that there's financial aid available. You may not know how to seek help when you're in college. You may have gone to a school where there are not enough resources that you could have gotten, strong education in math or STEM. So you may be very bright, but you may not have come with, the tutoring and the support that a student from a different background would come in. And so these are challenges that face educational institutions, which is how do I level the playing field? I mean, these are equally intelligent young people. How do I make successful a person who didn't come in with these advantages? So recognizing that and providing that undergirding is a big challenge, certainly for American institutions. And I guarantee you, as Indian institutions broaden, they have exactly those kinds of challenges. So it requires a mindset on the part of institutions to make students successful. So we can't come into this as with a finger wagging, right? Oh, here's an exam, you better take it. And if you pass, you pass. If you fail, you fail. You're not good enough, you drop out. That's not the attitude, right? The attitude really has to be, we have to make the student successful and we've got to meet the student where the student is. We recognize that if we open up our institutions to students of all backgrounds, they won't come in with the same resources, and it's not the students' fault. The students have a great deal of potential. So if your attitude is, how do we make the student maximize their potential, that leads to a very different kind of institution from one that's sort of finger wagging and passing and failing people.
Absolutely. And, it reminds me, like during this COVID time in India, especially, what startups found is that the best ideas were coming from the tier 3, tier 4, tier 5 cities, because they really knew what the gaps were and also how to kind of create a solution that were affordable and accessible, which is obviously very important. You did mention also about research and how that was a driving factor for you to come into education. I think in India also we're trying to really encourage research. But that being said, there's a lot of practices, good practices that sometimes get overlooked. But can you tell me, what are some good practices in research that needs to be nurtured in students on an early age?
Yeah, so I mean, let me sort of pull back and say, first of all, there are institutional good practices. I think I should reiterate here. All right. Good research doesn't happen without academic freedom. I mean, this is a fundamental tenet, so if you have faculty in your institution, they have to be free to pursue their interests, to speak in any way that they want, and if they come up with results that are, counter to the current thinking, that has to be allowed. I mean, so, fundamental academic freedoms are a big and central part of research success, right? So that's one thing. Now, for students, research success, first of all, is tied to a nurturing of creativity. So, a rote culture which is extremely exam focused will never result in good research. I mean, that's just a fundamental thing. You will be training students who respond only to exams and who will never have the freedom to ask big questions. We have to be able to accept failure if you are going to do good research. And so students who are, constantly studying to exam and constantly studying to pass or top exams and so on, fundamentally, though they learn the habits of hard work, which is phenomenal, the habits of creativity may get lost in a culture that is so focused on exam success, right? So that I would say is a big issue with research success. Now, of course, educational institutions must provide the opportunity to do research, and I think undergraduate research is a great way of opening up student minds and exposing them not only to particular subjects, but to the habit of research, the habit of creativity and independent thinking and searching and finding, and the habit of failing, right? I mean, failing and then learning how to succeed.
Yeah. And now that you've kind of been in India for a while, you're meeting a lot of students and parents, I assume. What kind of response have you received from them? And what are you finding that students are looking for in institutions when they want to think about studying abroad?
I've been blown away. I mean, I've had such a good time this week. I think, I've met students who are so full of energy and, they're just bubbling. All right. And it just leaves me so happy. And I will tell you, almost 30-40% of my audiences have been young women, which I did not expect. And in virtually every place I've ever been, these are not shy young women. I mean, they're not just sitting in a corner and letting the boys ask questions. I've had wonderful engagement, and that is a sea change. I mean, we keep talking about how nothing's changing. I can tell you that is a big change over my lifetime, right? And so that's phenomenal. There's lots of interest in the pursuit of successful careers. So these are not young people, and certainly not young women who plan to just get a degree and stay home. That's not who they are. They are ambitious and they're going after it. Great interest in graduate education and broadening their horizons by going abroad again, and even parents who are willing to support the journey of these young women, which is this whole other sea change. I can tell you, my parents were phenomenal, right? They let me go at a time when nobody used to let girls go either to engineering or abroad or anything else. Parents are willing to contemplate this, and that's another big sea change, right? And so I'm so excited for where this can actually go. Lots of interest in entrepreneurship. I mean, the startup culture is permeating undergraduate education in India, graduate education in India, and so boy, we better tap into that energy because there's such a hunger for that.
Absolutely. And thank you for touching upon your own experience. If you don't mind me asking, can you tell us a little bit about that? Like you said, at that time, it was very rare to see, women, especially, I mean, maybe Indian women also going and traveling abroad to study, to pursue engineering. How was that experience for you?
Let me tell you a story with that, right? So my story and my journey starts with the story of my parents. And my parents were the children of Indian independence. So they were teenagers at the time India became independent. And they were extraordinarily far-seeing. I mean, just almost radical in their conception of the kinds of opportunities that I was given. We had 3 girls, we had no brothers. And their view of us was, I realize now how unusual it was. And I'm absolutely convinced that their progressiveness was a result of growing up at the time of Indian independence, because it was a time of extraordinary change and people had all kinds of hopes and dreams, and they were part of that generation which saw themselves in a very different way, in a very non-traditional way. And so my parents sort of gave me opportunities that nobody would have. I mean, who sends their 16-year-old daughter 1,000 miles from home to join IIT Kanpur, where she is one of two women in a class of 250 boys. I mean, nobody does that. And they did it, right? And they were willing to take that risk. And when I think about the risk they took, I said, man, would I ever send my kids away like that? It would scare me. And they were willing to take that risk. Um, and it's really a result of that Royal at the time of independence and the big changes that happened that drove their own thinking. And it gave me a lot of energy and confidence, right? To have that kind of backing, to have a mother who had huge ambitions for me, where so many parents in those days would not really have those kinds of ambitions for their daughter. And so that was a huge driver. And when it came time to go abroad, when I got the opportunity to go abroad, they were not going to say no. I mean, so and believe me, I mean, nowadays people are so much wealthier, so they can afford it. In those days, for a government servant to even afford an airline ticket was a big commitment, right? I mean, it's a big chunk of my dad's salary, really. And they were willing to do that. And the fact that I was a girl didn't stop them. I mean, they were willing to, fund me at a level that was not all that easy for people to afford. And these were, decisions that they made because they were so committed to my success.
That's actually a really lovely story, and I'm glad that you had that and that you were able to, also give back to the community in the way that you are now. Like just one more question, because it has to be asked. What does it mean to you to be the first woman of color to be leading Oregon State University, or even for that matter, being the first woman dean of UCLA's engineering school?
For me, it's an opportunity. A great deal is made of my being a woman and a woman of color. And, I get that. Obviously, these are first, and I've had those kinds of firsts pretty much my whole career, right? I mean, I was the first woman PhD out of my department. I was the first woman full professor out of out of Purdue, the first woman chair, first woman dean. And of course, if you're first at age 16, you're going to be first at age 60. It's just the wave going through. And that's significant. I won't undercut that. But as I've said before, being an outsider to the game is really a superpower. It is an opportunity. You have an opportunity to see things differently from anybody else. If you're a part of the ecosystem and you're very comfortable, big change is not going to be possible because it won't even enter your mind. You won't even see the things that aren't working. If you come in from the outside, you come in with a set of experiences. You know what it means to be the only girl in a project team and nobody's listening to a word that you're saying. You know what it means to sit in a classroom where you're one of two girls and 250 boys, and every wrong answer you give is, a source of amusement or entertainment. So you know what it means to be in this extraordinary minority. And so when your students are faced with these things, at a visceral level, it in your heart, what that actually means, right? And that is a motivator at a level that it can never be if it's theoretical. You read that in a book, you will not get the kick to the stomach that you get when you hear these stories from your own students. That is the driver, right? That's the energy that drives you. And so I see my situation as a huge opportunity. And I'm absolutely confident that when I'm done with my presidency, I'll have done something important because, these things matter, right? Opening this up matters.
Right, you have to carry the sort of burden of like setting the standard almost.
It's not a burden. It's a privilege. I'm so grateful for the chance to do that.
Perfect. Any advice for any of the other people out there who are going to be the first of their communities, families?
You look at, being first is energizing. I know, lots of people see it as a burden, but it's not. I mean, I was actually a happy warrior all my life. I mean, as a 16-year-old, I wanted to be the first. I mean, I knew I was going to be one of, very few women. And I thought that was exciting, and I thought it was a chance to make a difference. And that, happy warrior attitude has always helped me through my life. So don't think of it as a burden. This is an opportunity to make your life meaningful and important and useful and to leave a mark. That's the way to look at this.
I like the happy warrior attitude. That's a
Yeah.
really great way to kind of go ahead with it. Thank you so much, Ms. Murthy, for giving me your time and sharing all your thoughts on this. I wish we could have gotten a lot more deeper into some of these topics because there's a lot to uncover here. And clearly, you have a lot more to share. And I really hope we can maybe connect again on one of these topics. International Women's Day is around the corner. And I think it's a great opportunity to have more discussions like this.
Thank you so much for the time. I can't tell you how excited I am about Indian education, Indian students, Indian girls in STEM, and it's just a phenomenal time to be here.
Really, thank you so much for taking time out. I can't imagine how busy your schedule is today or over the next week.
Thank you. Thank you so much.